Well, good evening, everyone, and a very, very warm welcome, really, to our event Sharpen Up here at Pillar Kitchen. For those that I have not yet met, my name is Victoria Smart, and I am a wellness writer, presenter, and host, working very closely with the Beauty Triangle to educate and empower audiences such as yourselves about all areas of your well-being. And I am very excited to be joined this evening by three phenomenal experts who are going to be discussing the routes to fortify both body and mind, and really from this view of longevity. Now, I am sure that we are all hearing more and more about the word longevity at the moment, but what does that really mean? For some people, it's about expanding and extending our lives. But for others, it's about really making the most of the years that we're living, whether that is addressing anatomical changes that can occur on our face. For others, it might be about skin health. And for others, it might be about taking a more holistic approach, looking at our body, our mind, and our soul, and looking beyond that to our social well-being or spirituality. Now, those are just a few of the things that we will be discussing this evening. But just before we do, just some housekeeping. You should all have a programme on your seats. In there, you will find further information about each of our amazing speakers. And there's also a referral card. So should you wish to be connected with anyone that you hear speak today, please just pop their details in there and we will connect you following the conversation. You also have an amazing goodie bag on your seat with some products from a fantastic brand called Junebird, which we will be hearing more about this evening. And I hope there's one spare because I will be grabbing that. And finally, just a few words about the Beauty Triangle before we begin. The Beauty Triangle was launched 7 years ago now in order to educate and empower audiences on all areas of their well-being, but importantly from a holistic point of view, which is why you will always find 3 speakers, each of whom are a true authority in their chosen field. But it was also launched to connect you, the audiences, with those speakers, which brings me very neatly to introduce today's panelists. We have consultant plastic surgeon and regenerative expert, Mr. Tunc Tiryaki. We have dual qualified consultant dermatologist and the founder of Junebird, Dr. Alexis Granite. And we have the founder of this amazing space that we're in and downstairs, Pillar Wellbeing, Jameson, who's also a columnist, has been a coach for 25 years, you were telling me? I can't quite believe that.
You depressingly told me that was as long as you've been alive, so
almost.
That aged me instantly on a longevity
But
panel.
you're the picture of longevity, so that's why. Now that's enough from me. I'm going to hand over to our speakers to say a very quick hello, and I promise that it's going to get a bit cooler in here, so hopefully it does, and we'll let some more air in. So starting with you, Tunc.
Tunc Tiryaki, I'm a professor of plastic and reconstructive surgery. I do mostly facelifts. I combine facelift with stem cells and whatever we are looking into the future. And for more than 25 years, I was dealing also with longevity. I probably will talk about that. I have one clinic in Istanbul, one clinic in London, so I travel between these 2 great cities, 1 week there, 1 week here. I will become a pilot. So.
Thank you, Tunc. Alexis.
Thank you so much. I'm Dr. Alexis Granite. I'm a dual US and UK board certified dermatologist. So did all of my training in the US and then have now been in the UK for 14 years. I also have, which you guys will all trial, a dermatological body care brand called Junebird, which really tries to unite skincare science and the same kinds of ingredients and efficacy that you would traditionally associate with facial skincare and bringing that to the skin of the body, but doing it in a way that's all about sensorial textures and beautiful fragrances. So you'll all be glowing for summer. And very excitedly, I'm opening a new clinic in October called Number J. So we will focus very much on aesthetic dermatology. So all sorts of things to complement what Tunc does.
Thank you. I'm Jameson, founder CEO of Pillar Wellbeing. So welcome to Pillar. We have a private wellness members club downstairs that looks at the 3 pillars of human health: how you move, how you nourish the body, and how you recover. The trainer and a coach for longer than I care to mention, looking after everyone from the UK Prime Minister to the CEO of EasyJet and the owners of Chelsea Football Club. So taking the learnings of elite level sport and understanding you don't get fitter when you train, you get fitter when you recover. So diving deep into sleep, stress, the gut, immunity, mindset, and cognitive function as the kind of foundations of executive health and performance. And I write the men's health column for the Times. And I've known Francesca for a while, so it's fantastic to be part of Beauty Triangle.
Thank you so much. So Tunc, we're going to start with you. Like you said, you've been in longevity, which is a buzzword now, for over 20 years, before it became really cool. Can you explain what longevity means to you?
Longevity for me is to differentiate your chronological age from your biological age, which is possible up to a degree. This is longevity, and to understand the facts, like everything in the universe, nothing is immortal, nothing shall be immortal, but we want to stay here as long as possible, as healthy as possible, and the final aim is to constrict the decay instead of years, instead of few days, like living an amazing life until the age of 90, and then suddenly die.
You mentioned biological age there. What exactly is that, and how can we tell that? Because I had the honour of testing mine in your clinic, and it was terrifying. My biological age is well beyond what my actual age is, but what is it?
We are a very complex system, and yes, there is the time ticking, but how our cells function depends on many things. We have genetics, which doesn't change. So imagine at the age of 5 and 85, your genes are the same. So why are we then suddenly 85 years old and look like that, right? The difference is not in the genes, but actually how those genes are processed, like in a computer. What happens in time is that the reading of the genes is getting messy. It's actually an informational entropy, I would say. Yeah, we are losing the system. And if you can, in a way, keep that system up and running so that your genes work properly, and that has many different pillars, then you can literally age slower than your time necessitates. So you can be actually at the age of 45 when you are 65, or you can be 85 when you are actually 65. So it is in our hands, depending on our lifestyle, what we do, what we don't do, our psychology. I don't like the word holistic, but I have to use it. So that holistic thing, how we deal with life and with ourselves, can help us to get away from the effects of the time up to a degree, I would say.
And what are the everyday interventions that you believe can help us to reverse that biological age?
Let's be controversial here, right? So I have to say, anti-aging and longevity is not about actually what you're doing. It's about what you are not doing. Like, you don't smoke. You don't go to bed late. You don't stress yourself up too much whatsoever. We were talking about it, like, we opened the first anti-aging institute, guess when? With the name Anti-Aging Institute. 80s? Not that far. but 2003, really. So, and what changed in these like 23 years is very minimal. So what we need to understand is the majority of the things what we are doing under the name of anti-aging is really not working. And what we are not doing in our life is much more important. So as far as we know about this science, one thing, immortality and this like velocity, escape velocity, whatsoever, is not in the visible future. The medicine, just 2 days ago, we learned, for example, there was a 20 years old, probably you would know about that, research on metformin on human trials. They were taking metformin for anti-aging purposes, and it turns out that it didn't have any effect at all. So don't trust to any drug. Just train, love, pray, eat less, and that's it. I'm sorry.
How do you help people understand their biological age? What does that process look like if they were to come into your clinic and they wanted to test all of these things that you provide in this report, which actually is quite fascinating? What does that process look like? What do we need to do?
Okay, now, yeah, let's get a bit more scientific now. What we are trying to do is we are trying to take a screenshot of you. Yeah, because what is really dangerous is not taking no pills, but to take many pills without knowing what it is doing to you. Like, for example, if you take too much zinc, yeah, it is decreasing your cadmium, which is actually dangerous. If you take too much potassium, it will decrease your calcium. So if you're gonna play this game, except of the things what I told about, you have to have an understanding of the state of your body right now. So what that means is, that's, I would say, the first scientific pillar of longevity, and that's the screening. In terms of screening, we are talking about genetics, and what that would give you is where it is that there are risks for you, yeah? You may be having risk in the cardiovascular region or this region or that region. That would give you an outline. Then you have to have a second screenshot about what we call epigenetics. That's very important. And epigenetics shows you how your body functions now, which can change. If you are divorcing, for example, your epigenetic would be coming out really bad, for example. But then if you become happy again, it gets better. So you can actually change something. You cannot change your genetics, but through epigenetics, you can change how that genes work. Third, you have to have all sorts of tests, MRI scans, CT scans, radiographies, whatsoever. You have to go to your like checkups every year. 95% of killers, cancer, cardiovascular, whatsoever, we can see beforehand.
Is that telomeres? Is that why people measure their telomeres?
No, I'm talking about, like, like you, through endoscopy, for example, you can see everything inside your colon. Through Röntgen, you can see your lungs. Through dermatology, you can see your skin. You can see what is dangerous. So screening is the most important thing, and then you have to take care of the problems. As long as you take care of the coming problems, and they will come, that's longevity.
What are telomeres and what role are they playing? Because in the report that I got, it just spoke about my telomeres. What are they?
Okay. Now, telomeres are important. Telomeres are little tails of the DNA in your cells, and every time the cell replicates, it gets shorter. So after 50, 60 divisions, there is no telomeres, your genes are getting cut, and then the cells die. So it is important to have long telomeres, yeah? But it is actually one of so many issues. And that's a mistake what we are doing. Like, we are getting obsessed on, say, vitamin D. And next year, eat just meat. Next year, don't eat meat. So what are you doing? And then, like, it is a balance. Telomeres are just a part of a big puzzle.
Okay.
And that's where you need a proper doctor to understand the whole system.
And I think that's the important part, isn't it? It's doing it with a practitioner so that we can understand exactly what telomeres are. I haven't primed you for this one, but I feel like it's part of a larger conversation at the moment. When it comes to longevity, what role do you think genetics is playing versus lifestyle? Is there a balance? Is there a split? How do you feel about that?
50-50, I would say, because genetics give you the risks. Yeah, you have a high risk factor for heart failure or heart attack whatsoever. But the way how you live triggers it or doesn't trigger it. So I would say epigenetics is very important. And if you know your genes, it is even more important, because then you can take the necessary measurements, I would say.
Thank you so much. Moving on to your facelifting surgery. You spoke at the beginning, you take a very regenerative approach. It's nothing like the facelifts that we're used to hearing about.
Yeah.
Could you start by telling us exactly what you do with your technique and how you're addressing the signs of aging at the deeper layers?
Okay, now when you read the recent papers, I'm talking about the last 10 years. Now we know we are having much better facelift results than 20 years ago, not because we are much better surgeons, but because we understand aging. And aging goes like this. It's not that suddenly the skin sags. Actually, what happens is our bones, the chin, the cheekbones, the temples, they shrink. And when the bones shrink, you lose the definition and the skin muscle envelope comes down, as if you lose weight and your jacket falls over the shoulders. That's exactly how aging happens. So actually, aging in a nutshell has three pillars, or hallmarks, I would say. Bone resorption, skin muscle attenuation, and stem cell, regenerative cell loss. Now imagine the old school facelifts, and regardless of the plane, you know, the D plane is so much popular these days. Imagine that you have a patient who has a smaller chin, and then you tighten the skin muscle just with a facelift over that small frame. What happens is the patient has a mouse-like, small, tight, weird face. As long as you do not reinforce the frame, as long as you don't put anything onto the chin, cheekbones, whatsoever, the face will change. The issue there is the usual way was, and I'm now afraid, we used to use fillers to reinforce those frames. However, we are now seeing more and more problems of the fillers. So my preference is to give that definition back using the patient's own tissue. So what I do is like I take the patient's own fats, tiny little cannulas, 2 minutes. In the fat, we have our stem cells, and there are now machines which just, you put it into the machine, and in a matter of 15 minutes, you can take the patient's stem cells out. Now I can get these stem cells, inject them on the bone resorption areas on the deep plane to give the same shape back. And then when I do the facelift, I don't change the face to a smaller thing, but I actually literally reverse the face to a younger state up to 12 years, maybe.
Wow.
Not more than that, and you believe me, it is not enough. So basically, the regenerative approach in face foot is you have to give the definition back, and then you have to deal with the face, and then you can inject the stem cells into the skin to upgrade the skin. The only thing what you need to keep in mind is, in surgery, after 3 hours, all the risks of complications skyrocket. So whatever you do, you better do in a matter of 3 hours at a time.
You spoke there about safety, and I think that's a really important part when we're speaking about any surgical procedure. What's your thoughts on these things that we're hearing, such as lunchtime facelifts and mini facelifts? Because that can be quite scary to hear that people are even considering those kinds of treatments.
Yeah, I mean, the answer again is very complicated. I am a believer of a mini facelift because if the patient is young, and the mini facelift is just doing this, no neck, no upper part, and in younger patients, just doing this would work in conjunction with the fat transfer. The problem there is who is doing it. And yeah, it's, I think, very, very important that you go to a consultant who knows what they are doing, because it is so easy to promise the heaven, but it is not that. I mean, we are not stupid. We would also do a facelift in a lunchtime, right? I would love to do that, but it doesn't work like that.
And can you speak a little bit more about exosomes? What exactly are they, and how are you using them not only in your surgeries, but topically as well?
Yeah. Okay, exosomes are, I believe, the future of everything. Why? You know, there's, you know vampires, right?
Vampires.
Okay, now you will see how I connect. 6-7 years ago, there was a paper published in Nature magazine where the researchers feature young and old animals together. When the blood circulation comes to each other, what happens is the young animal starts getting old and the old animal starts getting young. That is done through little messengers in the plasma. So these little intercellular messengers, because they are floating outside exo, they are called exosomes. Now, what they do is they are kind of like software, biological software updates. If you get them from young tissue, may it be placenta, cord blood, warts and jelly, whatsoever, umbilical cord, they carry the message and the software to update your cells. It's amazing. The problem is because of the regulations, there are not any registered exosome drugs out there. And for a long time, there will be not. And the majority of the exosome products out there are cosmetic products, which means you can get a cream from Boots, rename it, relabel it as exosomes, and you can sell it. Nobody will control that. So then again, yes, exosomes are the future. Yes, they pass through the skin barrier, so you can use them topically. They are amazing to increase the healing after lasers, for example. But you have to make sure that there are exosomes inside. And that brings us to the topic of the related publications, who is behind that, what are the results. So again, we have to get out of the marketing hell.
And finally, as a pioneer in regeneration, what are you excited about, or what future developments are you working on or looking into at the moment that could really change the future of longevity from your point of view?
Yeah, I am one of the founders of London Regenerative Institute, which is producing medical devices to isolate exosomes from the blood. So it is your exosomes. It's amazing. We are using medical devices which we produce for stem cell harvesting whatsoever. And the future goes where, first of all, probably to utilize our own power. So to get your stem cells to heal yourself, to get your exosomes to heal specific parts, to get your bone marrow stem cells to heal cancer. And down the line, probably what we'll be able to do is, and that's, I'm talking about 10 years probably, we will be able to differentiate between exosomes from old people, which is carrying messages of old age, and exosomes from young, to differentiate, to mimic the young exosomes, to give IV. Then we are going to talk about real longevity.
Wow, 10 years.
Maybe 5.
I'm holding you to that. Thank you so much, Tunc. That was a really fascinating oversight, and there will be time at the end for some questions, if anyone has any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alexis. Yeah. So Alexis, you explained at the beginning that you're a dual qualified dermatologist, but also an aesthetic practitioner. You take a really beautiful and considered approach to the skin. Could you start by explaining what skin longevity means to you?
Yeah, I think it's much off the back of what Tunc was saying, but I think it's around keeping the skin as healthy as possible for as long as possible. There is obviously overlap between anti-aging and longevity, and there's, as you mentioned, there's a lot of trends in this industry, and I think that is one thing you need to be careful of. But I also think it's a very healthy and probably psychologically better approach to think about longevity than erasing every line and wrinkle. So to me, it is about that full spectrum of sort of prevention, treatment, and then sort of ongoing maintenance. For me, that's kind of what longevity means.
Do you see that people are moving away from this idea of anti-aging and, like you said, not trying to remove everything, all the lines and the wrinkles that are on their face? Are you seeing that in clinic?
Yeah, for sure. I think, again, because the industry moves so fast and there's so much innovation, there's always something new and interesting. And I'm sure you're being fed, the latest injectable, the latest laser. I think it's important to take all of that a little bit with a grain of salt and really think about, what are the results you're looking to achieve, and what are the ways that you can do that in a very natural and healthy way, not only for the skin itself, but also for well-being, mental health, because you can get really caught up in the idea of sort of chasing the fountain of youth, chasing anti-aging. So I think if we reframe it away from anti-aging and, erasing every line and wrinkle, you can erase every line and wrinkle for sure, but it doesn't necessarily look good. And just because you've done that, it doesn't necessarily look younger. So I think it is about, looking your best at every age, but also looking appropriate for that age, biological or chronological.
You mentioned psychology, and that's something we'll come back to later because it's a really important part. But if someone walks into your clinic with concerns, where do you begin when you're looking at their skin? What are the first steps that you take?
Yeah, so I think, again, you really want to look at the skin from that sort of full 360. So as you mentioned, there are many different, reasons why our skin starts to look aged. That comes down to the quality of the skin. So just looking superficially, is there pigmentation? Are the pores enlarging? Then you think about, the dermis and what's happening there. We're losing collagen, we're losing elastin, all the way down to the fat that supports the skin. And that will thin and sort of slide down the face over time, as well as even bone and bone resorption. So there's many different layers to what we're looking at when we're evaluating a patient for the first time. I am not a believer in things like preventative Botox, treating things that aren't there. But certainly when a patient comes in, they might, oftentimes an area of concern might be, I look angry, but I'm not angry, or I look tired, but I'm rested. And so I'll try and sort of frame options around what we can do for that. And typically, you might start out with something like Botox. That'll be sort of an entry into the journey of aesthetics. But oftentimes where we run into trouble is when you try to use one sort of modality to treat everything. And I think that filler had probably a bad rap for a little while because it was being used, by everyone for everything, which you can see generally doesn't have the best results. So oftentimes actually thinking about a combination of treatments. So whether that's looking at, neuromodulators like Botox along with something to stimulate collagen and maybe laser, and it's not all being done at once. It's being done over the course of a year or 2 years, and thinking about that sort of long-term treatment plan, I think is really where you get the best and most natural result.
How can we enhance our collagen? Because we lose it at some scary rate, don't we? Isn't it like 7%?
About starting at the age of about 25, you lose about 1% of collagen, 1 to 2% a year. And then that sort of, unfortunately for women, drops off a cliff once you've hit menopause. So there are many ways to boost collagen. I think one of the really exciting aspects of dermatology, particularly aesthetic dermatology, is this focus on what we call biostimulators now. So you may have heard of products, they're injectable products like Profilo, polynucleotides, or the so-called salmon sperm. We have full host of brands that do this in a number of different ways. But these are products that really, you're not going to be overdone. You're not going to look overfilled. They're really meant to really hydrate the skin and then over time to help stimulate collagen and elastin production. You can do it also through skincare, of course. Skincare is a much more superficial, it's not going to go as deep as obviously your injectables. But skincare, I think, is a really important part of your sort of overall lifestyle to help support collagen. And then in clinic, we also have a number of treatment modalities that involve, energy-based devices, lasers. There are many different ways to try to tackle collagen. And some of it comes down to lifestyle too. So exercise, diet, it all has to be done with this, again, I hate to use the word holistic, but you do have to approach it from a holistic sense. It doesn't make sense to invest, to do biostimulators, twice a year and then not be doing anything else when you're at home to really maintain.
Pigmentation is a concern that we hear more about over time as the skin ages. How do you address that in your clinic?
So I think pigmentation is one of those things it's actually, again, very important, I think, to see somebody who is an expert in treating pigmentation, because there are many different types of pigmentation. There is pigmentation that comes as we get older, which is sun exposure. Those tend to be sort of discrete freckles or sort of darker sunspots that are smaller, and they're very amenable to treatment. So whether that's chemical peel or laser, those can be oftentimes, treated in 1 to 2 sessions, and then with sunscreen and sort of healthy skincare, you can really maintain those results. A trickier area where we tend to see pigmentation, particularly amongst women, is something called melasma. So this is what we call sort of more hormonal pigment. It often comes in pregnancy or around the time of perimenopause or menopause, so changes and fluctuations in hormone levels. And melasma is tricky. It's one of those things that just always wants to come back, no matter what you do. It actually can be triggered not only by UV, but by heat. So just by going into a sauna, you can actually worsen your melasma. And so that's something where you need, there are limited treatment options, but you don't want to be necessarily doing those same types of lasers that you'd be doing for sunspots to melasma. So we have options. But I think it is important to at least have a consultation to really understand what type of pigmentation you have in order to be able to treat it effectively.
And you mentioned lasers there. I think there's always this fear of using lasers during the summer because the weather's like it is hopefully now. When should we be using these lasers? When the best time to have these treatments?
Yeah, so most lasers for pigmentation, so things like IPL, intense pulse light, or BBL, broadband light, it does matter whether or not you have a sort of baseline tan. So that's what we're really looking at when we're assessing for what time of year to be doing these sort of modalities. So the issue with having a tan or having more pigment in your sort of baseline pigment in your skin is the laser can't differentiate between the so-called, problematic pigmentation and then your sort of background skin. So typically for pigmentation, we'll do treatments starting in sort of October time, go through maybe to sort of May, June, depends on the weather in London, and then sort of take a break for summer and pick back up in fall.
And aging doesn't just stop at the face, does it? The neck, the hands. I was often told that you can tell your true age by your hands, which is actually quite scary. What can you do in clinic for those kinds of concerns?
Yeah, so pretty much all of the same treatments we do for the face, we can do elsewhere in the body. And again, I think it tends to be that combination treatments will do the best. So you might think about things even like neuromodulators. So Botox actually can be quite effective for the neck. So those biostimulators, again, you can even do small amounts of filler, and then all of those same sort of laser and energy-based devices. So in my clinic, I tend to use things like RF microneedling, microfocus ultrasound, so things like whole therapy and soft wave. All of those options can be can go down the body, basically. I think one thing to be aware of, though, is just that the body skin is obviously thicker, it's a bit hardier, so it can take longer sometimes to see those results. But absolutely, you can do those same treatment modalities from the neck down.
I've heard of people having skin boosts in their knees.
Yes. Yeah.
What's that for?
Lately? So for that sort of crepey skin that you just start to see around perimenopause, biostimulators are great for that, great for the upper arm, chest, vertical chest lines, neck skin. Yeah, very effective.
So interesting. You mentioned skincare. What role does that play in your opinion as a dermatologist?
I mean, massive. So I'd say when I think about aesthetics, I sort of think of it as a pyramid, and the sort of base of that pyramid is your sort of lifestyle and what you're doing at home with your skincare. So I think it's great to, just start the basics. It doesn't need to be complicated. Certainly sunscreen, we talk about it all the time as derms, but it is genuinely one of the best things you can do for skin longevity. And then, typically as you sort of think about that longevity routine or so-called anti-aging routine, often we'll think about incorporating some sort of antioxidants. So things like vitamin C, vitamin E, these are going to help to reduce some of the effects of pre-radical damage. So what you might be exposed to from the sun, from pollution, from stress. So that might be something for the morning to think about incorporating underneath your moisturizer and underneath your sunscreen. And then for the evening, as derms, we're all huge fans of retinol, obviously. Retinol is a vitamin A derivative. It comes in both an over-the-counter version and then a prescription version. And great for sort of accelerating skin cell turnover, helping with pigmentation, helping to stimulate collagen. The one thing about retinol, I know how many of you guys have tried it, but it can be very drying. It can be tricky. You have to be careful of it with sun exposure. So peptides are also a great alternative, and you're hearing tons more about peptides, injectable peptides, but skincare peptides, I'd put up there with exosomes as a great sort of ingredient to look for if you're thinking about a sort of longevity regimen.
We're always told that sunscreen's that one thing that's actually going to stop us from aging the most. How can we tell which sunscreen to use? Because there are so many different types. There's mineral. How do you help discern which is right for the patient in front of you?
Yeah, I think, quite honestly, I mean, there are so many options now. So I think in general, my piece of advice is find a sunscreen you like, a texture that you will use, and one that you will put on consistently. That is the most important thing. So I'm a huge proponent of like a factor 50 or higher. 30 is okay too, but you definitely want to be applying that every single day. The one thing I would say as well, where there is sort of a bit more evidence of efficacy, is when it does come to melasma, so that sort of hormonal pigmentation. There is some evidence that physical blockers, so things like titanium dioxide and zinc oxide, which actually physically block the absorption of the sun from affecting the skin, can be more effective, and also sunscreens that have tint. And that's because the iron oxide in the formulation helps to reduce the effect of blue light, so ambient visible light, which for most of us doesn't have a big impact on our skin, but probably for people with melasma, it does worsen melasma a little bit. So tinted mineral block for melasma. Otherwise, find a formula you love and stick with it.
And I'd like to touch on body care, because what everyone's taking away with them today is your brand, Junebird. What role does body care play to you when it comes to well-being?
Yeah, well, I think one of the reasons why I was inspired to actually create a couple reasons. I guess one is I was seeing kind of more and more patients come in with body skin concerns. And we do lots of treatments in clinic, but I didn't really feel like there was the same kind of breadth of offering of skincare for them to be using to kind of maintain those results. And another piece I think that's going to be very interesting as we sort of progress the longevity conversation is that there's more and more evidence now that your skin is not just a window into health, but actually an active participant. So skin that is aged or damaged or inflamed actually produces inflammation inside the body and is linked to disease. So including dementia, diabetes, cardiovascular disease. And when you think about it, 96% of your skin is on your body. So we don't want to scare people into using body care, but equally I think it's only going to become that much more of an, important in the sort of longevity conversation when we're thinking about overall health. And so we really wanted to bring body care that had those sort of formulas with things like peptides, things like exosomes, all the sort of ingredients that you would typically invest in for facial skincare, but putting the neck down. But I think body care is also a slightly different proposition because while you might be willing to put beef tallow all over your face or snail mucin or whatever it is that's going to promise, the fountain of youth, you probably don't want to do that on your body. You want something that feels great, that sits well under the cloak, that smells nice. And so I think that body care needs to kind of have that sensorial aspect as well. It also means that you'll use it, which is what is so important when it comes to skincare, is being consistent. So we've created very efficacious and scientific products, but hopefully you'll find that they smell amazing, feel amazing. So it's something that you can really build a ritual, from.
And it's what, like you say, a ritual. You speak so much when you talk about Junebird so beautifully about this idea of self-care and actually taking care of ourselves and taking the time to apply those products. Alexis, what does the future of skincare look like to you?
I also believe very much in the power of exosomes. So I do think there'll be a lot more there. We've actually formulated with plant-based exosomes in many of the Junebird products. I think it will become a lot more personalized. So there will be a lot more sort of with the incorporation of AI, love it or hate it, it's here to stay. And I think where you can really have some interesting aspects of skincare is thinking about using AI to kind of find ingredients and also personalizing that quite a bit more for individuals. I think more will come out about the microbiome as well. So we talk a lot about the microbiome and the link to the gut and skin. But again, we don't really have a true understanding, particularly around individual microbiomes. So I think there's definitely going to be more in the future there too.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Alexis. Harry, I'll try and keep this short because I know that you're itching to get off to the football.
It's very true. Yeah, go. We can eat quick.
I'm clock watching, so I know what time the game starts. Like you said, you have been a coach for many years, but now you've created the beautiful space of Pillar downstairs, but helped to shape other spaces in the wellbeing industry as well. Could you just start by explaining why you created Pillar and what the main concerns are of the people that are entering Pillar Wellbeing?
I think it's really interesting that, I was asked on camera before, what are the learnings from elite level sport that you could put into everybody every day? And I think the biggest one was we're not getting fitter when we do exercise or when we train, we get fitter when we recover. And we've seen this huge drive towards recovery being this fundamental piece that people are trying to sell, but no one really understands. Got a Whoop band on that tells me a score. Do I understand how? Someone in the room has created, I don't know where she is over there, an amazing product about stimulating the vagus nerve to regulate your heart rate variability. Most people don't understand what heart rate variability is, but they understand what it is to feel stressed and understand what it is to feel calm, understand what it is to perform at a good level. We're priced at the top end of the luxury market and have spent a long time working with some of the highest performing people on the planet, and their stresses and needs are slightly different to your average person on the street. However, our physiology doesn't care about our bank balance. It cares about whether environmental toxicity, sleep, jet lag, children, stress, money, husbands. You mentioned if you're getting divorced, it might affect you negatively. Maybe it is affecting me positively because you needed to get divorced from that person. But our life factors are working for us. And actually, one thing I would slightly challenge is that we see more like 95% of lifestyle factors affecting longevity. Definitely a genetic propensity to something needs to be ruled out, but actually our health is in our hands. So we had a great opportunity to create a space where fitness, recovery, nutrition services. Got a couple of our amazing coaches here, all delivered to an exceptional quality, but all in one place. There's great gyms you can go to. There's great spas you can go to. I would argue that some spas aren't as detailed with their approach to longevity as you are. They're just about putting products on skin and then they leave and they're not kind of diving into what is essentially the largest organ in the body. And I think it's hugely important. But hospitality had traditionally been a place for an LVMH brand to make look pretty before you went out. It hadn't been a place where longevity at its core, which is also heavily connected to the interpersonal relationships that you have, was there. So we wanted to create great food, great community, great fitness, great recovery all into one space. And the luxury part of the market is generally where things start. And then there's a bit of a trickle down effect. And then also how they're ergonomically designed. And embarrassingly, it's super hot in here today. And so we haven't managed to regulate this temperature. But if I was going to come and design your bedroom, I would design it actually with temperature first. It would be dark, it would be cool, it would be quiet. And it should have ergonomic touch points in there that help you perform well, because our physiology interacts with our environment just as much as the services. So the next part of our business is residential design elements and the environmental toxicity, the light, the smell, the sound, the textures, the materiality, the ergonomic design will all impact you. So we designed it because there was a problem, because all of those things didn't exist in one place. And now we think we're solving other problems by looking at the environments, and hopefully one day that trickles into schools, into nursing homes, into student accommodation, into the flats and apartments and houses that you live in, because sensory design, I think, is going to have a huge impact on how well we age and how well we perform, and it's not quite been done yet.
It's being done now because you're on it.
It's being done and we're on it, but I think we've always been a little bit ahead of the curve with what we've done. We were measuring heart rate variability for stress and sleep in 2008 on our health retreats to try and track, and that sits in everyone's Whoop band now. So commercially, sometimes you can be a bit too far ahead of the curve, but hopefully we are predicting, I think, where design and services and value creation in real estate and hospitality is going to head.
I was going to ask you a bit later, but you brought it up twice now. What is heart rate variability for those that don't know?
It's essentially your body's stress reaction to the world, and you know, your HRV score is generally your recovery score. Higher heart rate variability denotes somebody who is more calm and relaxed in the rest and digest state of their autonomic nervous system. Now ours will be pretty low because we're, you know, speaking to a load of people who we hope like what they're saying. There's adrenaline pumping through our body, but generally our bodies are in this primed state of fight or flight, artificially do things that aren't going to kill us. And it's an innate defense mechanism that was designed to stop me getting eaten by a tiger. It wasn't designed for a bad social media post or an email from my boss who I don't like very much. But those things can cause us to feel under attack. And when your HRV is low and when your stress is high, your immunity is suppressed because your gut health isn't working properly. So a lot of what we should be doing for longevity is managing one's stress response to the world and ability to recover and rejuvenate. And of course, that comes with kind of cellular regeneration piece. It comes with a digestive health piece. But we're leading lives that are completely at jar with that. We're in an environment that is a brilliant quote from Ollie Patrick, who worked with us, says, we are in an anxiogenic environment that is designed to make us anxious. We used to be in an obesogenic environment that was designed to make us gain weight, more calories, less expenditure, everything is easy, don't go to the shop, I've got Deliveroo. And people gained weight and became ill. And we're now in an environment where everything is working against our physiology to make us feel anxious. From the screen time and the media, which is a bit of a kind of boring story, through to just kind of general bombardment on our senses. And I think design and also the people who we're with can impact that hugely, and that will define whether you age well or whether you don't.
Can we touch on the pillars of Pillar? Starting with movement, what role do you think movement plays when it comes to longevity?
I think arguably being cardiovascularly fit and having a good portion of lean muscle mass would be the biggest driver to how well you'll age. There's nothing that's better than being fit, and even smoking. A fit smoker will outlive an unfit person. I think be fit, be strong, be happy and pray, eat, love, pray. I feel like that's what my wife led on holiday last time we went on holiday. But it's true. Interpersonal relationships, physical fitness, nutrition and recovery are the pillars of how well you'll age. but you've got to be fit. You know, we're designed to be much fitter than we actually are. I think it's very rare that you see someone who looks great for their age, he's not really fit. And I think people should start with an idea of cardiovascular fitness. That's VO2 max. And it doesn't have to, you don't have to love running. You can do any kind of cardio. And especially speaking to a very female dominated audience, so this big push towards strength training for women as they even through all periods of life, but definitely as your hormones change, hanging on to lean muscle mass is vital. I wrote a piece for the Times at the weekend about GLP-1 usage and how much people feel that they are anti-aging themselves whilst losing 30-40% more muscle than traditional diets. So if you're on Ozempic or Manjaro, you are metabolically aging yourself significantly whilst trying to make yourself look and feel younger. It's quite a kind of juxtaposition there that I think it's important. So of course a PT is going to tell you you've got to be fit, but I think hopefully the panel agree, be fit and be strong. I think those are the key fundamentals.
And what are you offering here at Pillar that can support people in being more fit and strong? What is downstairs? What's like the secret?
Lean to our coaches over here and Eve over there, become the world's biggest middle-aged male advocate of reformer Pilates, having started it with her. I never thought those would be words that would come out of my mouth, but we have 28 different classes each week, but I also dislike the word holistic, but we also do visualization classes, breath work, sound healing, 3 kinds of yoga, different kinds of Pilates, strength and conditioning. There is a plethora of different modalities. I think the biggest mistake people make is they pick something that they don't really like because they think they should do it, and of course you don't keep up with it. As with your consistency here is key. So we have amazing coaches who've also been through stress resilience coaching. They've been through sleep coaching. We have female hormonal health specialist who's our nutritionist, Stephanie Chillas. And we believe in psychological fitness. So we have a clinical psychologist, Vanessa Moulton. She was Prince Harry's psychologist on Help the Heroes. She's ex-British Army. And actually the psychological approach we take is one of prevention over cure. So try and put ourselves into a solid psychological state as well as physical state, so that hopefully we can offset the chances of some of these things happening, which is what we're talking about. We're talking about prevention before cure really here. Let's try and not be reactive and wait for things to break. Maybe we could be strong and fit and happy and healthy so that they didn't break in the first place.
I love that you speak about psychological fitness. I think we are speaking a little bit more about it these days, but actually it's super important. And you mentioned recovery being a really large part of what you do. How do you encourage people to recover better, whether that's sleep, stress management, nervous system regulation? What do you do here at Pillar to support that?
It's a really good point, and that would be my typical challenge with a type A hedge fund manager, was like, pull the reins in a little bit and relax a little bit. I think people are understanding the fundamental necessity for sleep. Sleep was your lack of sleep in the early 2000s was like a badge of honor, saying, I don't need to sleep. You're sleeping on dead or sleep under the desk. Any mothers in here know, trust me, or anyone with small children, trust me, value that sleep. And I think sleep score has become a bit of a boasting thing for people, my recovery score. I would view recovery as mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual. And I think that taking some time to play an instrument or go to an art gallery or be with your children is as much of an emotionally restorative practice as a sports massage. And so what we try to encourage is people have human connectivity, they reduce inflammation where they can, and recovery can be active. So a sauna and an ice bath, a mobility session, those things are active. You have to do it. Recovery is not just, no, I'm not going to train today, I'm going to sit on the sofa and eat Haribo's. It can be, that has its place. I'm a fan of Haribo's too. But rambling a little bit, but we need to try to make sure that the coaches can convey a message and philosophy that is not as one-dimensional as many fitness spaces can be. Lift some weights, have an ice bath, listen to a podcast. It has to feel like it is a little bit more considered and rounded than that.
And personalised, like you were saying.
Everything, I think, needs to be hyper-personalised. We have a longevity assessment. We look at heart rate variability. We look at body composition, at lifestyle factors. We look at sleep. We look at posture. And we do a movement screen to identify imbalances before they kick in. And so we can be very prescriptive around your programming, because you and Francesca and me and my mum or my wife are all completely different entities. And there are principles that we can abide by, but there has to be a level of personalization, which I think broadly lacks in the wellness industry. It feels a bit one size fits all. And I know that the two people to my right are massive proponents of screening and testing and understanding physiological data and then being prescriptive based on that.
On the note of data, what are your thoughts on wearables? Because they can play a really important part in understanding our own well-being, but actually, do you think they can potentially become a bit obsessive and be counteractive?
Definitely. I mean, I've got a Whoop on, but I was at the health summit over the weekend, and there was a big push towards the anti-optimization route. You know, how better to ruin a good run than tracking the time and didn't get it, and you know now that run's a failure. I'll wake up, feel great, check my Whoop score, and I feel shit because my Whoop's told me that I hadn't slept well. So I think data has to be a governance tool to kind of keep us on track, but we can't lose intuition and kind of personal perception. I shouldn't need a piece of technology to tell me whether I do or don't feel well. However, if it can identify some patterns and behaviors that if I change them would be improving of my long-term health, I think there's a lot of value there. But I got rid of my Apple Watch, got rid of lots of my different apps. I know how I feel, but I've been training for a long time. So I think a good coach with intuition married with your intuition, a sprinkle of technology was probably the right blend.
Which is the best tech wearable to wear, because you've done a lot of work behind the scenes with actually helping to create these products.
Yeah, so I was been to Apple's headquarters in Cupertino maybe 4 or 5 times. But with Jay Blanick on the kind of, not the creation of the Apple Watch, but they were kind of iterating what features would start to come. This is Apple Watch 2. We're probably on Apple Watch 222 now, so I think with very minimal change in features. But yeah, I've been in rooms with people much smarter than myself who kind of dive into the technology without being day-to-day consumers of this. Kind of not answering the question. I like Whoop, don't love Oura Ring because the fitness tracking's not very good and I'm into fitness. There's going to be some new interesting ones coming out around continuous hormonal monitoring. And so we've had continuous glucose monitoring, which has looked at, you know, blood sugar fluctuations. And I think you can move into a place of overkill when you get into that space. But for people on HRT or for people going through a fertility journey, being able to constantly monitor your hormones in real time, I think is going to be a really, really valuable tool. But good old Whoop for sleep, I think is fine.
Noted. You mentioned community. In a world where we are more connected, but actually potentially feeling lonelier than ever, what role do you feel that community plays in longevity?
I think community, I mean, I guess longevity became more of a mainstream concept when Dan Buettner wrote Blue Zones and he identified these places in the world where people live to be the longest and happiest and most disease-free. And a key fundamental part of all of those communities were what they called the grandmother effect, right? There were the people who lived with their great-great-great-great-grandchildren, and there was this huge arms wrapping around you from a community perspective. And the same thing happens in religious groups. We live about 12 years longer if they're part of a religious community, statistically, because of the support networks that bring. And I think the way our society's moved, remote working, post-COVID, people are isolated and people are lonely and people aren't finding inspiration from others. And I think that's a hugely sad thing for an entire generation of people. And wellness has become this tool where I actually, thinking about it, couldn't think of anything worse, but going on the first date on a run club feels like really alien to me. But there's a whole generation of people finding human connection through well-being, with that's group fitness, a love of different modalities of exercise, and I think that's fantastic. So we encourage as much as we can for wellness as a broad brush, because it could be an educational talk like this, it could be a Pilates session, it could be breathwork, it could be running, to bring people together in a space of no agenda and a non-competitive space. And you find your tribe in that space. And I think that your tribe, you know, you said love and pray, you've got to have people to love it, to have a good life, openly, even people to love you without being too soft.
Oh, I love it.
Wellness can be a conduit for that, I think.
Guilty. I've been to almost every run club, I think, in London, looking for friends, husbands.
You've got to come to
I haven't been to Pillar Run Club, but I've had a
Second Sundays Run Club. We're going to be doing it. Actually, interestingly, what you just said, partnered with New Balance on our next one, which is coming in the autumn. And their whole new campaign is about running without tech, running without tracking. Here's a pair of shoes, here's a running buddy, go run. I think that's really brilliant message actually from the people who sponsor the London Marathon, which couldn't be more competitive. So,
And that's 2 days long. The
well,
London Marathon's going to be for 2 days.
Yeah,
What
we
a
look
change.
forward to seeing it the next one.
And what role does purpose play? You've spoken about community, but actually purpose and having that guidance from something, whatever that may be.
I think the worst thing that we can aspire to do is to become affluent and then retire, and that purpose and drive that got us to a space of success goes. And I think you see people, or we would see in some of our parents, that they would have retired and lost their purpose. And you hear people say, "I've got it's age 10 years in 2 years," when they should really be the most empowered and free. So I think purpose, from an Asian perspective, or that kind of Eastern medicine, your ikigai, your purpose, that has to drive you to a certain point, but your purpose can also be your grandchildren, your family, your hobby, your personal health and fitness. So purpose is, I think, vital, not just from a biological perspective, but from a psychological and emotional perspective. Get up every day and I want to go and win, and I want to be by example, and I want to do these things. And often entrepreneurs suffer, and athletes suffer greatly after they retire or they sell their businesses, because they lose that purpose. And I think it's really important that all of us are conscious of purpose, from philanthropy through to entrepreneurship. I think it's vital. I think one of the most vital things, to be happy, not necessarily to live a long time, but to be content.
I love that. And finally, the same question to you. What does the future of longevity look like from your position?
Finish on something controversial, which is strip it all back and get absolutely back to the basics of what we were supposed to be doing, which is what you said right at the beginning. It's moving well, connecting well, eating well, and sleeping well. And I think if we were able to do that in a way that was made accessible and simplified, you see kind of Instagram memes of people waking up with red light masks on, of 55 different bits of methylated water in there brushing their teeth with it. That feels like a minefield of disaster and anxiety. Wake up, see the sun, move, hydrate, go into the world with purpose, meet people, love people, share things. That's the best way to live. I hope our industry, and I hope people that we work with, help you die fit. I think that would be a nice thing to do. That's what I aspire towards.
Such a beautiful note to end on. Thank you, Harry. And I was at the same festival as you, and I saw everyone queuing up for that water. That special water.
Gary Brecker's methylated water. We don't sell that here, by the way. We sell rosé if you'd like to have a glass of Whispering Angel. We're, unlike Steve Barlow, we don't believe it will ruin the next 4 days of the life. So help yourself.
It's all about balance.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Harry.
Thank
that was
you very
brilliant.
much.
Thank you to all of you. That brings us to the end of our panel discussion. I think what's really beautiful, and you've all said so lovely, so nicely, is that it's about personalisation, but also balance. That idea of love and self-care and community, which is really special when actually we have so many things, products, techs, etc. in front of us. It really is bringing it back to basics. So thank you.